What is up, nerds? Welcome to Nerdome episode 2. I am your host, Montana, aka Wildcard Movies, and I am with my co host today, Blake from Unspoken Rules podcast. Today we're talking about Loki, the season finale. The episode title is called For All Time Always. Uh, there's a lot of things that we saw in this episode that pertains to the rest of the MCU and a lot of reveals, whether it's the big bad of the show, missed minutes, a lot of drama going on in the TVA in this episode. But this episode it's always been Loki and Sylvie's show, and this was no different. A lot of character development going through this episode. Uh, what did you think of Loki episode 6 for all time always, Blake?
I thought it was a great series before the final episode, and now this last episode just honestly added to how great this series was. I mean, Loki and Sylvie kind of like finally achieved their goal, which was like finding the creator of the timekeepers. But then, obviously, as we know, that information led to a lot of things that they definitely weren't expecting. I really liked the fact that they finally kind of introduced a big bad because honestly, since WandaVision, we've been getting constant fan theories about the big villain being like waiting for a big time villain, and then obviously it hadn't panned out until right now because in WandaVision we didn't really get a main bad villain. In Falcon and Winter Soldier, as we know, we really didn't get a main bad villain. But now with this show, the fans are finally kind of getting that. They're finding the fan theories can finally, one of them's finally right. It was Kang the Conqueror. And I think we're finally going to get like that next Thanos level threat that we haven't seen, obviously, since Thanos left the MCU or even before Thanos was in the MCU. And honestly, with all that new information, I mean, I thought it was arguably one of the best episodes, if not the best episode of the series so far. But I'll let you, before we get into the details, how you felt about the episode.
Yeah, of course. This was the one out of all the MCU episodes that we've gone between WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki that actually felt like we were setting up something for the future of the MCU, whether it's Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Ant-Man 3, Quantumania, as we know that Jonathan Majors, the actor that is playing King the Conqueror, has already been confirmed to appear in that film already. So that's interesting as far as what the timeline is going to start to look like. I love this episode. This was everything that I wanted it to be and more. We finally got that big bad, as you were saying, Kang the Conqueror. He's finally here. It may not be the one that we're as accustomed to from the comic books, but as we learn throughout the episode, his history, he talks a lot about the multiversal war, about how he comes from the 31st century, and that he essentially founded the multiverse, and he interacted with a bunch of different versions of himself. He talks about some of them good and some of them bad. Of course, those bad versions we're going to come to find out later are the Conqueror versions. And there's a lot of things that I want to talk about that is going to be leading into the rest of the MCU that I feel that I feel like this may be a bigger villain than Thanos. And that's kind of crazy to say considering the journey that we had in the Infinity Saga, but I'm excited to see where the rest of the MCU goes and to see where the future of Loki takes us because I feel like he has an important role to play in this as well.
No, yeah, I mean, I've heard that Loki, I'm pretty sure, is in going to show up in the Doctor Strange movie. But then this is honestly, like you said, Kang the Conqueror, the actor that plays him, is already confirmed in the Ant-Man movie. That movie doesn't come out for what, 2 years now? So we
Yeah,
have
I think they
so
say
much.
February 2023 is when it's slated to hit theaters.
Exactly. So we have so much time in between there. So I'm certain that he's going to show up at some point before that. But honestly, going into the upcoming Marvel movies, I mean, you have Spider-Man, which has had a ton of rumors circulating of not only a Sinister Six with villains from all three different versions of Spider-Man, but also having the three different versions of Spider-Man along with those villains. And that is something before Loki that it seemed kind of like very far-fetched for me because we hadn't had up to that point really in Spider-Man Far From Home. We kind of had a little tease at that, but it was soon to find out that obviously Jake Gyllenhaal's character did not actually come from a different universe. He was in fact from that universe. So that movie kind of hinted at it, but it was kind of just almost a big joke because it didn't end up having anything to do with the multiverse. So now we kind of get that, and it doesn't make those rumors seem crazy at all. So like I'm thinking that it'll have something to do with all the villains in different Spider-Man all appearing on one timeline, which has something to do with all the. I mean, we saw at the end of the Loki episode, all the timelines kind of going crazy. I think there's going to be a break, and that's somehow going to get all the villains in Spider-Man into one timeline, which could set up for a really crazy movie. I mean, having six villains from three different Spider-Man eras. I mean, that's crazy to think about. And if you're not really big into the comics or like have ever read them, this is something that is completely new to you because before Loki, I mean, the multiverse, I mean, just seemed like a confusing thing that might or may show up in the Marvel. And I'm glad that they're doing it because there's endless possibilities that they can do this because we can see so many different versions of characters that we would have never been able to find without introducing this kind of setup into the next phase for Marvel. And I'm just excited. And like I said earlier, you've got Doctor Strange too, which like I said, I think Loki's confirmed in that movie. So, I mean, what they're going to do with, I feel like they're going to add a couple villains into those movies. Obviously, we said the Sinister Six in Spider-Man, but I think Doctor Strange is also going to introduce kind of a almost elite tier villain that we haven't seen so far in the MCU just because I don't think we're going to get all of Kang so far. I think this was like a little treat, and then we're not going to get a big fight with Kang until maybe Ant-Man. So that means they've got to introduce new villains, and I'm just kind of excited to see what the future holds for the MCU.
Yeah, of course. So now let's get into this Loki for all time, always. This title is an homage to where Loki and Sylvie are currently in this moment in time. They're at the end of time. They have officially beaten the cloud monster. I forgot what his name was at the top of my head. I can't remember. But they have reached the Citadel as is referred to in the show, and this is where everything we see this. And I believe the opening of the show, in my opinion, was probably the best part because we hear all these voices of past MCU characters fast forwarding into this moment where we see black holes in the cosmic MCU sucking this all of time into one central area, which is called the Void. The Citadel is basically like a fortress kind of surrounded by the timeline, which is kind of interesting to think about. The timeline in which they refer to as a sacred timeline is a big giant circle, one flow of time. The TVA's purpose is to destroy any branches that come forth, and that's essentially where Kang uh, decides was the moment that he had to reveal himself to both of the Lokis and tell both of them of what his plans are for both of them and how he came to be. We learned that he created the TVA out of the sole purpose of making sure that none of his past, or not his past, his variant selves that are evil can come and conquer different multiverses, which is essentially what Kang the Conqueror is. Not only is he a time traveling villain, but he's essentially a conqueror of realities. And he's the one that he's always in the shadows. He's deceiving the Avengers in the comic books. He's making sure that everything goes according to his plan. So this was nothing different. We learned that he created the TVA for the sole purpose of making sure that all the variants in history and different timelines are destroyed to keep the sacred timeline essentially intact and to make sure that none of his variant selves come into play. And that was interesting to me to think about and to see what kind of Kangs, different types of Kangs that we're going to be getting in future shows and movies. Of course, Miss Minutes was also another person that we all thought was an innocent little hologram thing, but she was evil the whole time. That moment at the beginning when she pops up randomly and she just scares the hell out of everyone in the audience. She even scared Sylvie and Loki at one point, and she offers him that deal that we can give you what you want, that you can live your life peacefully. We give you the Infinity Gauntlet. That was it was tempting for the character development of Loki and Sylvie, where they have come through and been through this whole time. To whether or not that's a test to what their development has been this whole time, whether or not Loki has really changed. Does he really want the throne, or does he want to be somewhat of a good guy and achieve his destiny of becoming someone that he was not meant to be?
No, yeah, I mean, I think that was like a perfect example of, like you said, the character development. Because if we take Loki from episode one and he gets an offer like that, he's taking it without a doubt. But then we get to Sylvie, and we kind of see like where it all comes. She like even before they walked in, she was kind of like, "What do I do now? Like this is what I've been trying to get to my entire life, and now that I'm finally here, she wasn't quite sure how she felt because of that character development, because of her meeting the other variant of Loki. I think they really changed each other for maybe the better. And then we get into once they finally meet Kang, they get down the elevator. He tells them what's going on. He tells them, without us, without the TVA, without myself, there's going to be a multiversal war that you cannot stop, that will end all time. And Sylvie thinks it's a lie the entire time, whereas Loki is taking it, well, this might be a lie, but if it is true, we really need to rethink about this. And I think Sylvie, this kind of just shows how much like ending the TVA mattered to her, because she kind of like ignored all of this. She ignores the possibility of ending every single universe as we know it, every single timeline. I mean, she just doesn't think about that. Her and Loki fight about it. They have a huge moment. The audience, and including myself, I think that all is well. They kiss, they drop swords, and then Sylvie pushes Loki into a different TVA timeline, and ultimately she kills Kang, which sets up a rapid reaction of like the timeline branching off in a bunch of different directions, which also ends with Loki getting pushed to a different timeline to where he's from. We got to see another
I don't
version
even
of
think.
Mobius.
I'm not even sure if that was a different timeline. I think that was just a different universe. And
Oh,
if you
that's what
ask
I
me,
sorry, that's what
I
I
think it
meant, a
was a
different
different
universe.
universe.
No, I mean it definitely was. Mobius didn't recognize him, B90 didn't recognize him, and I think he got pushed into a universe that Kang was open with the TVA, because we saw that in that huge statue of Kang in like his traditional comic book it was a comic book accurate outfit, and you saw him there. And if Kang is being portrayed in the TVA, I'm sure the entire TVA in that universe is aware of what's going on. And I'm it's crazy to think that we're not going to really get any information on this for months, because we're not I doubt that
I
anything in the next coming series are really going to touch on this at all. So we're kind of stuck with Loki being stuck there. The universe is in a madness, and I don't know where Sylvie's going to be at this point. It's kind of, and then not even to mention you've got Ravonna, who Mobius ran into in the middle of the episode, and Ravona's kind of on like that secret mission, because you saw Miss the little clock she gave
miss
her.
minutes.
Yeah, Miss Minutes gave her files telling her like, and then Ravonna was like, well,
I
these aren't
wonder
the
what
files I
those
was
files
expecting.
were.
I think it's a backup plan. I think Kang kind of sensed that it was the end for that one, at least for the King that was in that universe, and I think he was sensing that. So he sent her on like a backup mission to kind of try and restore things. That's just what I think. But it also, that's what I'm saying. That's the biggest question. Like, where'd Ravonna go? What were in those files? Like, what is she going to do? I think that's like, where is she going to show up next? Like, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
think.
and even in that reality, we saw Hunter B-15. She essentially tries to reveal to the TVA that, hey, that we're all variants and that everything that we've learned to become and is a lie. Of course, you see your beloved Judge Ravonna as a regular person in on Earth. That her variant is now running the TVA, which is just that's another for this reality. The whole purpose for Kang is wanting to make sure that the both of Lokis took part in becoming the new heads of the TVA was to turn them good. Hey, you guys can tell them that you are all variants, and that we can lead them into a different type of a TVA that's a good, rather truthful TVA, rather than people that are being lied to. And of course, their realities are upended, and there's nothing you can do. You can't go back to your timeline now. So it's that's something that this whole entire the different versions of Kang are interesting. I just wanted to give a quick history lesson on the character of Kang the Conqueror. I believe in this version of the Kang that we see here, his name is Immortus. He's not the Conqueror in this point of his life. He's more of a person that is an immortal being. He's pretty much been around for thousands and thousands of years. He is not on that destructive path of wanting to conquer different realities. This was essentially the good version of Kang the Conqueror, the original version of Kang the Conqueror. not the one that is hell bent on destroying all reality. That he talks about in his history lesson. Of course, he's a scientist from the 31st century. In the comic books, he's a descendant from Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. Um, we see him become Iron Lad at some point as Nathaniel Richards. At a certain point in time, he does become Kang the Conqueror, but he's all over the timeline in Marvel history. Of course, he's in back in ancient Egypt. I want to say that his name was. I keep forgetting what his name was. I'm gonna have to look that up real quick. But of course, he has him and Ravonna are connected in the timeline at some point. I know Ravonna is one of his love interests, so it's interesting to see that he gave her files that we have no idea what they are going to be. That he sets her off on a journey that who knows where she's going to be at. And of course, we find out later in the episode that Loki is renewed for season 2. That's one of the first Marvel Cinematic Universe shows to be renewed for a second season. And of course, I believe that Loki is going to have an important role to play in this whole entire multiversal war that is coming. So, what do you think about this whole history lesson of Kang the Conqueror? What kind of devastation do you think that he could do to the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Well, to start with, like Ravonna, like I said, like a little bit earlier, that I was reading that, yeah, this, like, who knows what like those files could be. I was reading that it could be like a backup mission. Like I said, like who knows, like maybe Kang kind of saw this coming, because he said that he could see everything up until like 10 seconds before when he was having that conversation. So you could think that maybe he kind of saw the end coming for himself, and maybe he sent her on a backup mission. I was reading something about that. And then also, going back to the question, I think he could end. I mean, the answer is everything. He could end every single timeline, every single universe with how strong he is, because not only does he know everything, but there's like endless versions of him. So, like, if you get multiple bad versions of himself that are so powerful, who is a strong enough character? Even the Avengers couldn't stop something like this. And there's, I mean, if Kang is conquering on his universe, who knows if he's already fought a version of the Avengers, or who knows if he's fought a different version that has tried to stop him. You know what I mean? Like, this is a,
Yeah,
we don't know. We honestly, to this point, we don't know what version of Kang we're going to get in the future of the MCU, because like the character said in the show, there are endless versions of himself. So, like, which one are we going to get? I don't really know. That's why I'm kind of excited, because there's so many possibilities that they can go with this. But like I said, he could end everything. I mean, I'm trying to think right now of like characters who are strong enough to like put up with a force like that, and there just really aren't very many. And not to mention, who knows what he's going to be bringing with him? Who knows what the other universes are going to do? I mean, there's a lot of question marks that Marvel's going to have. I'm sure they're going to do a great job with this. They've done great jobs with all the other phases. I'm sure this is going to be none the different, and I'm just excited to see what they do with him, because Kang can end everything. He can destroy so many different heroes. He can destroy so many different universes. I'm just
erase
excited,
people from
like I said.
existence.
Exactly. And like you said, like, even when Sylvie was trying to kill him, he's like, I already knew what you were going to be doing each and every second before to that point. So, I mean, is he going to be able to like do that when he comes to this universe? Is he going to be able to just like read every move before it happens? And if that's the case, then like, I don't see how they're going to stop him.
Yeah, Kang. I think I found the name for Kang the Conqueror's original, where he goes back in time to the original Egypt. His name is Rama Tut's. That's his name, and he essentially was the first king of Egypt, pretty much until Ensaba Nur, aka Apocalypse, arrives on the scene as the first mutant in existence, which sends pretty much Kang into a spiral into the future again. It's interesting to look at some of these other characters, as you say, besides Kang being introduced as the next big bad of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Whether or not it's going to be a 5-year arc or a 10-year arc remains to be seen. We saw Thanos in a 10-year arc, but now we're getting a lot more movies and TV shows in a quicker span of time than we did in the past. So who knows how long this Kang the Conqueror arc is going to take. But essentially, Loki is now in a different reality. At the end of this episode, he's in a different reality. What he thought was the love of his life, Sylvie, which really was himself, but in a different version of himself. Um, is now trapped in a different universe. Mobius, Hunter B-15 do not know who he is. Of course, we see the statue of Kang as Kang in his Kang the Conqueror outfit, but as a statue kind of almost, which is pretty cool to see. Well, I'm interested to see what reality he landed into and what's the state, because Mobius mentions in this sequence that there is about 63 different branches coming off in different directions. God, because they're dealing. To think about this, this TVA is dealing essentially with the same thing that our TVA in the main universe is dealing, and I'm sure it's the same situation all the other universes with their own versions of the TVA. How are they dealing with the multiverse now essentially being cracked open wide, like wide? And where do some of these where does the TVA go from here? What do you think about this whole situation?
I kind of like that they sent him to a different reality because then again, like you said, like where are we going to be going from this? Because the next time we see Loki, probably is going to be we're
Doctor
going to give
Strange.
in exactly we're going to be given some explanation though of how he got either away from there or we're going to pick up where we left off and we're going to be Loki in that universe. So I mean, it's crazy to think like I don't know like what Loki's going to do because none of those people know him. Like when he was talking to Mobius, I think Mobius was saying like name yourself, who are you, like go like and then go do something and then like what is Loki's just as confused because Loki obviously was not expected to go into another universe. He doesn't know why Mobius doesn't recognize him or why B-15 doesn't recognize him, so he's just as confused as kind of the audience was. And
Not
then
only is
there's
he confused, but he is just terrified of what he had just
oh yeah,
witnessed. That Sylvie pushed him into a different universe, essentially. And I don't even know if Sylvie knew what she was doing at that point, because the way that I don't know how you, I think King obviously planted which is he obviously put the pad thing on the desk. But before Sylvie had picked it up, he had done something to that pad that probably was done on purpose, if I had to guess, because he always has a plan at
oh
some
yeah.
point or another. He knew what he was doing, and obviously Sylvie didn't know what she was doing when she sent him to that different universe. He arrives to find Mobius and Hunter B-15, not knowing who the heck he is. They say, "Are you an analyst?" Like two different times. Loki's obviously the look of terror on his face, realizing what is about to come. That Sylvie essentially just killed a person that's going to send a bunch of different versions of Kang into existence now. There's no way to stop this multiversal crack, and the universe is about to be doomed, essentially.
No, yeah, and you can tell how scared Loki was just by the tone of his voice. I mean, he was so frantic. He was basically trying to explain, like, "Hey, guess what? Like, Sylvie just did this, and now the entire world, every universe could end. Like, we need to do something now, now, now." And he kind of basically gets ignored because they don't know who he is. They don't really know what he's talking about. So it's like Loki not only is scared to get taken away from Sylvie and just given found out this information that the entire universe is in shambles now. And then he gets placed somewhere he doesn't know with people who don't know him and don't really buy what he's saying. So not only is he scared and confused, but he's also kind of lost because he's in a place where he doesn't know. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do. And Loki's kind of going to be a main piece in the upcoming MCU. I mean, he's going to be having a main part in a lot of different movies. I don't think we're going to get a specific, obviously, we've got another season of Loki, but I don't think we're going to get like a main Loki movie. But like you said, you talked about the 10-year arc of Thanos. And even though they're coming out with a bunch of movies and shows kind of like now at a more rapid pace, I expect it to be about 10 years because think about it. We don't get the new Ant-Man movie for 2 years. And that's kind of going to be, it seems like to me at least, the first movie where we get a big action scene or that Kang has a big part in. So I don't think if we're going to wait 2 years for that, then we're going to have to wait a longer period of time after that until we start introducing probably different universes, versions of characters, how they're going to tie together with each other, who's going to be on the good side, who's going to be kind of fighting with Kang to end the world. I mean, I think they have so many different movies that they have to introduce so many different characters that it's going to darn near take 10 years because there's just so much information that needs to be shared, so many different stories, so many different characters that I can see it definitely going being a 10-year arc again for this phase.
That would be, that would be really interesting to see. Like that would be. I think that would make Kang even bigger than Thanos at that point because he's been introduced now early on in Phase Four, if you ask me, and as the main villain of the TVA. Not really a villain, but the guy that created the Time Variance Authority and is the ruler of time. So, like, of course, we may see even like prequel movies that take place super far back in time, and we may even see Kang planting seeds in these extra movies that who knows what's going to happen that leads into the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We have Eternals obviously coming out pretty soon in November. Who know who possibly could we possibly see Kang somehow intertwined with the Eternals, because the Eternals essentially they're different beings from another planet, but they're essentially gods that have been around for a long time. So who knows if if maybe they've crossed paths with Kang the Conqueror at some point in their lifetimes. What brings them out now that essentially Thanos didn't bring him out? Does Kang maybe bring him out? Does something else bring him out? Who knows at that point, because
The
this is going to be a
timeline's the whole timeline's going to be interesting. Like when that Eternals movie takes place, like is that taking place after the series finale of Loki in terms of like actual time in the MCU, or is that taking place before, during? Because that's going to have a huge impact. Because maybe Kang's version in this universe dying and all the branches spewing out, maybe that's what really draws the Eternals out. Because like in the trailer for it, I mean, I think you remember we talked about this a long time ago, like how they said that Thanos, like they come out for big threats. So if they didn't come out for Thanos, then obviously that's just kind of showing you the full effect of how strong Kang is, because they didn't bother to show up for Thanos, who was trying to snap half of existence, but they're going to come out for Kang. That kind of just gives the audience an idea of really how strong and powerful Kang can be.
Yeah. Kevin Feige, the president of the Marvel Studios, always has a plan. He always decides to make movies for a reason. He placed Kang here in this Loki finale for a reason. It was to set up the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's essentially what it was. He wasn't really the bad guy of Loki, but he was the overarching like villain, if you per se, the one that is responsible for taking Loki and Sylvie out of their timelines and causing chaos to people's lives. That's essentially what it was. See, but of course, the direction of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is now we're heading into uh, the multiversal war. Essentially, according to Kang, there has already been one multiversal war before. Of course, in the comic books, we've seen multiversal wars occur before. We see multiple realities of different characters in different timelines, and we always see that end goal event, something a la like Secret Wars or something like that, that combines all the universes into one timeline. So I'm interested to see if that's something that the MCU is going to go in that direction or not, because it could become confusing for some audiences. I know it's not going to become confusing for the audience of the hardcore comic book lovers, but it could become confusing for the casual audience goers. How do they respond to different multiverses? How do they respond to different versions of characters? Does it get confusing? What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's going to be a little confusing at first, which is why I think they need to make it a 10-year arc, or maybe not exactly 10 years, but like kind of a long arc, because I think they need to do a good job of slowly introducing each different kind of version of characters, and like whether or not they want to have, like, if the rumors of Spider-Man are true, we're going to have all three different versions of Spider-Man, which won't be too confusing for audiences, which is why I think it's a good idea to start with Spider-Man, because it's three Spider-Man that we've already seen. It's three Spider-Man that the audience know, they enjoy, they like Tobey Maguire, they like every Spider-Man that's been in place since then. And I think that's why Spider-Man's kind of a good start for the multiverse, because like I said, I think it'll be a lot less confusing to see characters that we already know. But with that being said, as they introduce new characters and new versions of characters that we might have already seen, I think they need to do a good job of slowly introducing that, so to not confuse the audience. But obviously, no matter how slow you do this, this is a kind of a confusing thing. So the casual audience is going to get confused because, like I said, this is something that is completely new to them. it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around like like endless amounts of multiple universes with the same person acting in a completely different way, which is, like I said, why it needs to be kind of a long arching series, like maybe not 10 years, but something long like that, so we can kind of slowly get into like maybe do one movie per, like you said, prequels, where I'm sure we're going to get quite a few prequels into this universe, because they need to like kind of show you like who King was at the beginning, kind of show you different universes. I think they can do a great job of maybe like, I don't know, obviously I don't know which characters they're going to introduce. I was kind of trying to think off the top of my head like how they could introduce different universes, but I think as long as they pick their characters they want and then slowly introduce them and not mix them at first. I think you can't mix the universes at first, other than Spider-Man, because those are characters we already know, because you got to introduce them one at a time before you can put them all in one. Because if you try to put multiple universes in one in a movie kind of soon, it's going to confuse the heck out of people, because they're going to be like, all right, where did this person come from? How is he here with the same character on the same timeline? I think as long as they kind of introduce it one universe at a time, one reality at a time, before kind of jumbling it all together, then it'll confuse the audience less.
Yeah, of course. As we get ready to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the multiversal war that is incoming into the franchise, I want to talk about certain characters that I feel that maybe have an important role going forward as we progress into the rest of the MCU. Obviously, we know Loki being one of them as a main character. Of course, season two is for a reason at this point, because they're gonna have. I felt that at the end of this episode, there was a lot of questions still unanswered, and that they could have talked about a little bit more. But obviously, that leads to the mystery of the Loki show and what it could mean for something like season two and for the rest of the shows. Of course, we're obviously, according to the Hollywood Reporter, obviously Marvel Studios hasn't confirmed this yet, but Loki is supposedly going to appear in Doctor Strange 2: The Multiverse of Madness. So that's essentially where we'll see him pop up next. In what capacity, we don't know yet. But from Loki's development throughout this show, of course, in the regular Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline before this, we saw Loki go through so many different changes to his character. We went through the guy that wanted to destroy New York City in the first Avengers, the guy that wanted to take over Asgard, who was jealous of Thor in the first Thor movie, to essentially saving Thor and his and Jane Foster in Thor: The Dark World. The guy that was living his life peacefully on Asgard before Thor came in Ragnarok. He's gone through so many different stages. Even in Ragnarok, he was not that before he Loki and Thor were obviously had that connection towards the end of the film, that they were essentially brothers again, not enemies that they had been in the previous films. Then everything gets taken away from Loki and Thor, obviously in Avengers Endgame when Thanos snaps his neck. So even in this show where we see Loki, we get that Loki from Avengers, the one that was hell bent on destruction, the one that wanted to take over the world. So yeah, this we had to start completely all over with Loki in this series, where he is essentially the guy that wanted to take over the world, but then he finally, this is like a self-discovery type show for him as a character, because we essentially had to take 10 years of stories from this previous Loki's life and somehow insert it into this Loki's life. That's 10 years of development in maybe like 5 days of actual real time is pretty crazy to think about. But he transforms as a character, someone that doesn't want to essentially destroy the world anymore. He did think about wanting to have that throne. He did think about wanting to take over the Time Variance Authority, but essentially he did not end up doing that. He ended up being on the side of good at the end. He had to be the one to try and convince Sylvie to not kill this guy, to maybe believe what he's saying, that they could rule the TVA together, essentially be good and keep the timeline in check. Obviously, Sylvie as a character, where she's come from, and her role in the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as we know, she's still alive at the end of this. It's interesting that we'll look at also. But Loki essentially is a good person. He realizes something that he never had it before, that he was not alone in the world anymore. That he had people behind him. And at the end of this season, everything gets taken away from him. Sylvie gets taken away with the person that he thought he loved. She betrays him. At the end, she kills Kang. Obviously, I love that the line at the as Kang is dying. He says, "I'll see you soon." Essentially, knowing that what was going to happen. And well, actually, I think he talks about passing the threshold. He did not know what was going to happen at that point. But obviously, he told them flat out that if you kill me, that bunch of different versions of myself that are much worse than I am are going to come, and they're going to come for vengeance. So Loki obviously has an important role. Sylvie has an important role as the progression of the MCU continues. Um, I don't know where Loki is going to be at as Doctor Strange 2 comes around, but it's definitely something that we have to think about. Uh, I don't know. I just don't know. There's just so much information that we don't know what's going to happen between Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange 2. Who knows what's going to happen? That's the problem. There's just we can't talk about speculation that we just don't know what the information is yet.
No, exactly. I mean, there's just like it'd be one thing like I'm all for like fan theories, but it's almost to the point where like we don't have enough information to like have any theories kind of yet. Like a little bit, but to the point like we said like multiple times, there's so many possibilities they can go with this that it's kind of really hard, like you said, to speculate of the future before we actually get more content because there are so many movies that are coming out that are hopefully going to be filling in a little bit. I bet in Eternals we're going to get a little bit, maybe an end credit scene that'll kind of tie it together, I'm sure. And the same thing with Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. I mean, it'll be interesting to see like what impact they are going to have in the universe because obviously the Eternals are really strong beings. They could almost be like an Avengers 2.0 that maybe they team up with the Avengers. I have no idea yet, but like obviously that's where I kind of see them. But I'm not too familiar with the background of Shang-Chi as much, and so
Me
it'll be
neither.
interesting. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that movie looks so cool. Like I bet you that's gonna be. I mean, I said that Black Widow had the best fighting scenes. I am more than certain that movie's gonna top that by far. And I think I'm not sure how they're gonna include him in the rest of the MCU, but I'm kind of excited. I'm really excited for that movie actually. But like you said, I mean, there's just so much like there's a huge gap that we really just can't speculate too much without giving too much and without giving any more information. I mean, I'm just excited at a loss of words almost like of what where Marvel's going because I think this is just going to be way more bet. I think it's just going to be so much better than the phase with Thanos. They did a great job introducing him kind of early on. I think Guardians of the Galaxy was probably one of the first times we saw Thanos. Really, maybe we saw him in an end credit scene before that,
We saw him
but
in the end credit scene of the Avengers. The thing with
exactly
Thanos, even in the first three phases, that we really didn't get that much time to spend with Thanos.
no.
Essentially, that he was really there in Infinity War and Endgame the most. So even before that, we never really got that much story time with him. That I feel that's gonna change now with Kang. Of course, we're gonna see him appear in a bunch of different stuff.
No, yeah, it'll be very exciting to see. I think I wonder if like we're gonna get to a point where like there's gonna be multiple Kangs that end up coming and going. Like maybe they'll a couple of them will get killed off, and then or let's just say one of them
The
gets
theory,
killed
the
off.
th- yeah, the theory that I have is that there's going to be one king that comes out on top of the other kings. Because I remember, if I remember correctly, in the episode, he talks about how they all fought each other. That I think there's going to be one king that stands out over the rest of them, and that's how
Mhm.
he's going to get that moniker, Kang the Conqueror, because he pretty much slayed all his variants in the paths in his path in order to conquer the multiverse.
No, yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised though if like we have one king that kind of overpowers the rest, but kind of working together maybe with a couple others. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with that, but it'll be definitely interesting to see what Kang can do because not I mean he's so powerful by himself that there really doesn't need to be any more villains working with him because he can control and devour endless timelines and universes that like he doesn't really need too much help. He can do it by himself. And obviously I'm just excited, like I said a million times now, just to see what Kevin Feige does. Like you said earlier in the show, he always has a plan, and I think he's got one set now, and I'm just waiting to see the plan kind of fall into place.
Yeah, as we look at the rest of the movies, obviously, I believe the next movie that we'll see the multiverse come into play, obviously, is Spider-Man: No Way Home. There's been a lot of conversation about whether or not Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Mans are going to appear, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty much a given at this point. As much as they don't want to confirm it, the longer they hide it out, the worse it's going to get. The secret is probably like the worst kept secret in Hollywood at this point. Um, the trailer for Spider-Man: No Way Home, I anticipate to be coming very soon. I believe they were holding off for the end of Loki, so the trailer doesn't seem as confusing as it is after rather than before the Loki finale, because now we know what the hell is happening with the multiverse. The multiverse is in shambles at this point. The reason why these characters from other universes are coming into the main universe is because the multiverse is in shambles. And I do believe that Spider-Man and Doctor Strange are going to also have important roles going forward into the multiversal war. What kind of Spider-Mans are we going to see throughout the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a question. Obviously, we have that Sony Marvel deal that is supposedly expiring soon, but I don't know what the hell is going to happen. I would assume that Spider-Man will be in the MCU for a long time, just because it's beneficial for both sides at that point. It's just my thoughts. I don't know if that's actually going to happen and whether or not Sony decides to pull the plug, but I think it would be a foolish decision on their end if they decided to do that. Because after No Way Home, there's a lot of possibilities you could do with the Spider-Man franchise that we have yet to scratch the surface yet. Obviously, this will probably be the biggest one that we'll see. But the multiverse with the villains from other universes coming in, Doctor Strange is also going to have an important role, as well as Scarlet Witch, I anticipate, in being able to control the multiverse. Of course, we saw at the end of WandaVision, she's reading the Darkhold, and she hears her kids from, like, I want to say it's from a different dimension or a different universe. I
Exactly.
could
I
be
feel like
wrong.
I think you're right on that, honestly.
That who knows what that end credit scene at what point during the timeline that the Marvel Cinematic Universe takes place, whether or not that's during this time of when Loki happens, or whether or not she senses that the universe is open, that she can hear her kids from a different universe now. It's interesting to look at. Of course, Doctor Strange is obviously he's the master of the mystic arts. He's going to have an important role to play in the multiverse war that is incoming. Whether or not he can be able to capture and close all these multiversal portals, capture the villains that are coming through, bring in the heroes that he needs to be able to fix the situation. He's obviously going to have a bigger role. Who knows what's going to happen with the Avengers? Whether or not when we get Avengers 5, what capacity are the Avengers in? Who's the team? What people are on that team? I don't know. We don't. You know, I don't even know. There's still a lot of storytelling to happen at this point. Characters to be introduced. I don't know who the heck the Avengers are going to be during Avengers 5, whenever we get that.
No, yeah, and the last thing I want to say on Spider-Man is I saw a report with or an interview with Zendaya, I think it was a couple days ago, and she was talking about how like usually after the third movie it's done, talking about like so maybe Spider-Man 3 is the last solo Spider-Man movie. I'm not expecting him to not show up in any other movie after that, but I think we might not get another solo. So I mean, think about it. What other main Marvel character got more than three individual movies? Iron Man got
Thor is
three.
getting one.
Okay, there we okay. So Thor's getting his fourth one, but Captain America was capped at three, and
Well, he's getting
Civil,
well. I guess the original Captain America is capped at 3. I guess we're getting a fourth Captain America with Sam Wilson
but
now.
no, I meant with like one individual.
Yeah.
You know what I meant. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where Spider-Man, where his part is in this, because what people I think don't understand is how strong of a character Spider-Man actually is. Like I feel like so far in the MCU, I feel like he's kind of been nerfed a little bit. I think
Well,
that
yeah, everyone's calling him Iron Man Jr. and Doctor Strange Jr. now because
exactly.
he's been
But like
babied by them the whole time.
no, and not only that, but like we kind of got a glimpse of how strong he was in Civil War. I mean, he took down I don't know how many different guys in that movie, showing how strong he really is. But like I think other than that, he's kind of been nerfed to a certain sense. But I think at the end of Spider-Man 2, we kind of got him like really developing as a superhero in the sense that like he's over it. He's got his spider senses back. I think he's gonna just continually being a stronger Spider-Man, and I think we're really going to see that in the third one. I think we're going to really see the true Spider-Man and all of his strength and abilities, because up until this point, I really don't think we've gotten a full view of how strong of a Marvel character Spider-Man is.
Yeah, of course. I mean, even in Infinity War Endgame, this guy went toe to toe with Thanos. For God's sakes, this guy
Yeah.
is he's one of the most, in my opinion, he's probably one of the more powerful MCU members that we have in the universe at the moment. Who knows at that point what his role is going to be? And of course, there's a lot of speculation, and I'm sure when the trailer comes out, we'll have a lot to talk about. I'm sure there'll be some nuggets in there that we'll have to point to the direction of Spider-Man and his future. Let's look at some other movies here that potentially the Kang could possibly have an influence on. Besides Doctor Strange, obviously he's going to have an influence on that because we know the multiverse of madness was his doing at that point. Um, Thor, Love and Thunder. I'm not entirely sure we'll see Kang in this film. I don't think he's going to have that significant of a role. What do you think about that one?
I think we'll get Adam introduced into that, because we haven't gotten any hints, teases
Oh,
since
Adam
the end
Warlock.
credit scene. Yeah, since the end credit scene of
I don't know if
Guardians
we'll get
2.
him until I don't know. I don't know if we'll get him until Guardians 3. If you ask me.
Okay, yeah, maybe he'll be in Guardians 3. I wasn't sure. I guess it really depends on how much they're combining Thor with the Guardians. I haven't really
I
read too
think
much.
what I heard was that the Guardians are not going to be in the film that much. If I had
Okay,
to
yeah, I
guess.
wasn't really sure if they were kind of deciding on him being kind of with the Guardians. I wasn't sure how much of an impact that they were going to play in that movie, so that's why I wasn't really ultimately sure if he would show up in that one. But I'm excited for that character. I mean, we've gone kind of like years now without a single mention of Adam Warlock, and based on the comics and whatnot, he is a strong villain. He can
Yeah,
do some damage, and
the thing, even with the
go
comic
ahead.
book, so he was essentially the guy that was in part of the Infinity Saga. Sorry, and his role in the comic books has primarily to do with the Infinity Stones. So I'm curious to see where his role in the MCU is now with the Infinity Stones out of play. Whether or not he's going to be time travel related now is a question. How do they change the story for him going forward? Because his story was tied to the Infinity Stone, so I'm kind of curious to see where that goes.
No, yeah, but I mean, is there any other topics we want to cover for today? I mean, I think we knocked out that Loki episode.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, I still want to think what else that Kang, as far as his role, um, Black Panther, do we see him possibly in that one? I know we obviously it's unfortunate with Chadwick Boseman, of course, being passing away. Is there a chance that we see a different version of T'Challa come from the multiverse in this film that we don't know about yet?
I think honestly, at this point, it's really hard to discuss without giving any more information in the future movies, because there are so many, like you said, I mean, there's just so many different possibilities what they could do with that Black Panther. We could just have one Black Panther show up in from a different universe, or they could just thrown another Black Panther in that current universe, either his sister or somebody else.
Yo, I can't hear you. You're like completely silent now.
Talk and then understand that you.
I think that's gonna be it for today's show, if I had to guess. All right, so there's obviously a lot we could talk about here with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, how Loki impacts the universe essentially into the multiversal war. Um, yeah. Besides that, uh, you guys can find me over at Wildcard Movies on Instagram and Twitter. You can find Blake at Twitter on Instagram at Blake Spillers. If you guys haven't already, if you guys are listening to this podcast interested in sports, we have another podcast on this podcast network of Unspoken Productions called Unspoken Rules, where myself, Blake, and our other co-host Sebastian talk about sports topics daily. If you guys haven't already, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and review. Um, if you guys are listening to us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment. Besides that, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going in a crazy direction. We're totally excited for it. We're obviously going to cover that a lot more on the show as it happens. But besides that, that's going to be it for the end of episode 2 of Nerdom in our Loki and Marvel Cinematic Universe future preview. We thank you guys for listening and watching to us. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.